Well, hello everyone. This is Data Driven Formula One with Patrick, Henz, and Ganna Pogrebna. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Ganna. Hello, all.
So yeah, good to see you, Patrick. Good to see you all. And today we have a very exciting episode. We will talk about again one of my favorite drivers, and that's Ronnie Peterson.
Exactly.
Or the Superswede, right? The Superswede.
Superswede. And as you said, it will be very fascinating. But let's say also a small warning for you. Very fascinating topic. But I think it will not always be such a feel-good episode as when we are speaking about other drivers, not only because of his fatal accident, but also we have to mention suicide. So if you're not able to or not want to listen to such topic, this episode will be nothing for you. And also, of course, a trigger when we mentioned suicide, if you feel the need, there are lots of different hotlines where you can support if you feel such kind of depressions or feeling inside you. So I just wanted to mention it in the beginning.
Yeah, so I think this is a very important point, Patrick, and definitely, now the mental health issues are very, very important. And if previously they were largely ignored, then certainly for this episode we need to keep that in mind. And I agree that. So underneath the video we will put some, some of the websites where you can potentially look for some information. For some help information on mental health, we will start with the beginning. And this Ronnie Peterson, I think, an amazing and really underappreciated figure in Formula One. Absolutely amazing talent, Swedish driver, and a very interesting background because his dad was a baker, and nothing you couldn't have possibly predicted that this guy would become one of the most successful drivers in the history of Formula One. Again, very tragic fate.
Yeah.
For him and his family, in fact, but we'll take it one step at a time. And first, we just need to say that he was born basically kind of at the end of the Second World War, 1944. And a very, very interesting career because, like I said, if, for many drivers, Patrick and I were saying, his dad was a mechanic, or his dad was really interested in cars. I mean, this guy comes from a family. No one was interested. No one literally was interested in any in racing or Formula One or anything. So, not Formula, but racing in 1944 anyway. So completely different background, and it's really amazing what he managed to achieve considering that background.
That's correct.
Just maybe we can probably go on with some stats. So if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see the statistics. But I guess for the podcast listeners, we can mention that he made 123 entries and had 10 wins, and he raced for March, Tyrrell, and Lotus, and very. He had a very successful career in Formula One, but like I said, he keeps being really underappreciated because we already mentioned that. So there is no intrigue. We mentioned at the beginning of the episode that he tragically died in an accident, and if you are following our episodes, you would know which season it was. It was 1978 season, but and because of his early death, we don't know what he could have achieved otherwise. So
exactly. So that's why let's start a little bit with his early career. Quite typical for
quite traditional career, right? This is an interesting thing because yeah, like considering the background of his family, that's also interesting, right? So, you know, he went into karting. So, and I think if he didn't have an opportunity to go into karting, he wouldn't end up there, like other drivers who were able to drive in the dad's car, you know, and enter, you know, early competitions. I mean, it's good that he had that opportunity to do karting.
Yeah, and not to interpret too much into that. I mean, Sweden is traditionally, of course, a very highly developed country, but in opposite to many other regions, where we don't have that much gaps between the different levels inside the society. So it's not that difficult to switch completely the focus of life. And in this case, I think it's a good example how the Swedish model in general is quite successful. And that's why we see Sweden always as number one in happiness, not number one, but always in the top 3, top 5 countries of happiness, social development, anti-corruption, and so on.
Right. So he was very he was very successful in karting. So he won 2 Swedish titles in karting in 1963 and 64. And then the progression was to Formula 3, which is, you know, again, like Patrick said, quite a traditional progression for contemporary drivers. But if we look at drivers, you know, in kind of 1970s, not all of them went through this, you know, this path, right? So many of them were just enthusiasts and had some family opportunities, but this was kind of a new type of career for a Formula One driver, and now we see that this model is actually working to date pretty much, right? Where people start with karting, then they move to some lower level formula, and then eventually they grow to Formula One.
Yep.
And in Formula 3, yeah, I just want to say that he won the Monaco Grand Prix, right? And was very successful there. And he also won the European Formula 3 championship, which is why he managed to get into March. So he was spotted I think he was spotted earlier as a talent, but you know, certainly the winning of the FIA European Formula 3 championship put him in a spotlight for many sort of talent hunters in Formula 1, and he eventually ended up in March.
Yeah. And finally, 1970, we see him inside a Formula 1 car.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, so he again his debut was in with the March car again, and you know, he had quite a interesting career in March in general, and he managed to actually score for March, in the sense that he did finish in 7th place in his first race in Monaco, and I think this was quite a good. Yeah, it was good. It was a good result for March. Yeah.
Yes, and especially if you consider that he was not driving the works March, but was driving for Colin Krabi's work supported team. So he was driving the March, but not driving for the March team.
For the main team, yeah. That's an important distinction.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
As we every time discussed in 1970s, also 80s, 90s, and before, we had a lot of these small teams, and they had been very important for offering cars to young talents. And then if you can convince the people with your efforts in the smaller teams, which doesn't mean that you win races, but you can score points. and good results, then you step up and come to the smaller, to the manufacturers and works teams.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He was in Grave's team. That's important. Yeah, I also wanted to say that when he started in Formula One in 1970, he was 26, which seems like a pretty old. Like
Right,
people pretty much retire now at this age from Formula One. Well, not quite,
yeah.
but you know what I mean. So yeah, but I just want to say that for 1970, 26 was a very decent age to start. So it is a pretty young age. It was a pretty young age at the time for a Formula One driver. It's not like not like right now when they start at whatever 18, right? And even earlier, some of them. But you know, this was quite a good age to start, because some people started even later than 26. Yeah, being 26.
Right.
Yeah, and this is where in 1971 he actually managed to move to the main March team, right? And basically became quite successful there.
Right, he became second in the championship after Jackie Stewart. And also what is quite typical 1970s, drivers had not been that specialized as maybe today. Formula One drivers only do Formula One, but it was quite common for people to start, for example, in the sports car championship. For example, he drove together with Andrea de Adamec and won with an Alfa Romeo 33 in Watkins Glen 6 hours.
Yeah,
so,
and I just wanted to say, sorry to interrupt, Patrick, that this is like a really amazing, you know, footage. You can find the footage of it, and really really fascinating. And remember that this is a person who drives in Formula One and in sports car competition, and this was not this was not something out of the ordinary, because like Patrick and I discussed in 1970s and 1960s, many drivers did it in 1950s, so basically early Formula One years. But nevertheless, this particular one is really interesting to watch. So if you do come across the footage online of this Watkins Glen 6 hours, it's really interesting. Yeah, I just, again, for those of you who are watching and listening to us the first time, I want to say that we're on YouTube, which is our usual platform, and Spotify as well, if you want to watch us on video. And yeah, again, we are trying to follow the kind of the ethical way of using materials, which is why we normally show you photographs and we're not showing you footage because it's copyrighted. But there are proper sources on YouTube, and if you Google Watkins Glen 6 hours 1971, you will find that footage. Yeah,
right. And thanks to his good results, he got the opportunity to go to Team Lotus and be the second beside Emerson Fittipaldi. Of course, a great opportunity for a young driver.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, well, on the one hand, it was a great opportunity. On the other hand, again, we've talked about this at length in different episodes. Lotus was a very, very innovative team, but at the same time, it was one of the most dangerous teams in 1970s, because essentially the idea of the Lotus cars, at least initially in the early 1970s, was this eggshell car, which made it very, very fast. But at the same time, it was very unreliable, and often led to fatalities, and we need to mention that here. It was not reliable and it was not very safe.
Yeah, for example, Jochen Rindt famously said, with going to Lotus, I will win the championship or I will die. And most tragically, he had both the same year. And again, also part of one of our special episode about Jochen Rindt.
Yes.
So 1973.
Yeah, 1973, and his debut was in French Grand Prix in Lotus, right? So again, not in Formula One, but in Lotus car.
Yeah.
And this was very good year for him, right? Because he had like 4 wins in total that year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like I said, the total of his in total he had 10 wins in Formula One, and 4 were that year, 1974, with Lotus. So certainly he was the right driver for Lotus, right?
Right, and we see the 1973. We are speaking about this very iconic Lotus in black with the gold. So
black and gold, my favorite. Yeah.
Maybe the really the Lotus on its highest point, on its climax. So he was really in a car where you could win championships.
Absolutely, and again, Ronnie Peterson was absolutely amazing talent, and this was a good opportunity for him to be in a fast car. But again, we need to always make a footnote about reliability of this car.
Exactly, and the poor reliability led to the result that he only became third in the championship, besides being in the fastest car, besides having 4 victories.
Yeah, it's a very fast car, and you can see it right now on your screen if you're watching us on YouTube or Spotify. Black and gold iconic Lotus, one of the most successful cars in 1970s, and this is 1974, right?
Yes. And this is in 74, this is the Lotus 72. Yes, the 72. Originally, Lotus wanted to be successful with the new design, the Lotus 76, but as both drivers, Peterson and Jackie Hicks, not like the car. And I mean, and in general,
it just wasn't safe, as we know from X's interviews.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, they not like it because they not like the design, but it wasn't good to drive. It wasn't competitive, and that's why Lotus used the 72 for the whole season. And
exactly.
Nevertheless, Peterson had 3 victories with this old car.
Right. So I think he was quite comfortable by that time in the old car, and indeed, it's not easy to win with outdated technology, and we know that in Formula One everything gets outdated by the minute. But he did manage to score 3 wins, and that's absolutely amazing.
And in 3 completely different tracks. I mean, the French Grand Prix, Italy, Monza, high speed, and on the other hand, Monaco, the small curvy track. So victories on complete different tracks, which show, of course, his quality as a driver, but also that the car itself was competitive also on different environments.
All right, so now we go to 75, 76. And 75, as we've spoken, we have a separate episode on 1975 season. It was not a great year for Lotus, and again, the driving the old car was it would be ridiculous by that point.
Yes.
So he had basically decided to change, right? He decided to switch to Shadow Team.
Yep, but Colin Chapman could stop him, promising a great fast car.
And he
but
delivered.
no-
Let's face it, he delivered on that promise. And again,
But
I
nevertheless,
just also want to mention that Patrick and I did a separate episode on Colin Chapman where we discuss his creative genius and his attitude and his character and what his engineering. Yeah, in that episode.
yes, and also his ability to convince people. At the end, and we discussed it also in the episode, his ability for decision making or business in general, of course, failed him as he was involved into the DeLorean disaster, which also caused criminal charges against him. But before this, of course, he had various talents, not just engineering, but also ability to convince the people to drive for him.
That's right. And, so Ronnie Peterson, we have to say he's kind of stuck around for, and he even drove a Lotus 77, but then he switched to March engineering, right? And there was an immediate success with the Italian Grand Prix there.
Exactly. And speaking about, was it 77? And just an interesting episode, and we discussed it in this our episode about 1976. Remember that Niki Lauda had his infamous fire accident, and number one on the list of Enzo Ferrari to replace Lauda was Ronnie Peterson, but from the hospital, Niki Lauda, for whatever reason, put his veto because he not wanted to have Ronnie Peterson as his teammate. For whatever reason, we don't know exactly what it is, but they both had been together at March and maybe not became the biggest friends. But
well, I think it had to do with the fact that. So again, I'm going to speculate here, but just
we speculate.
But just sort of from our knowledge of the style of Niki Lauda and the style of Ronnie Peterson, so Niki Lauda was very data-driven person, right? When he was actively racing, and he encouraged that change. Whereas Ronnie Peterson, he was more of kind of more traditional drivers, right? Where it's more about passion and method and less about data. And I think you do need to have some agreement within the team. So I think that was one of the potential reasons for that. And also I think is because Niki Lauda really wanted to really kind of get back there. And so that's another thing. I think if he agreed, then it would have been, so it would be like saying that I'm probably not coming back as soon as I want. But I think he just also wanted to push himself to
of course
to go out there and race again.
Yep. So with this, Ronnie Peterson, of course, is also always connected with the six-wheeler, which he drove in 1977, which when you see us on Spotify or on YouTube, see here on the photo.
Yes, exactly. So this was an experimental car, and we have discussed the six-wheelers again in a separate episode about designs, weird and wonderful designs in Formula One, and we also discussed that car in 1977 season. We cannot say that the car was a complete disaster. It was very experimental, and certainly, you need to give credit to Ronnie Peterson for taking on this new technology, because not every driver would have risked to be there, and he had that opportunity and he took it, and we really well, I personally am very grateful that he did, because otherwise we probably wouldn't have seen as much of this six-wheeler in the championship.
That's right. But so he was in 1977 in this six-wheeler, a little bit in the shadow, I think, of Jody Scheckter, who reached the only victory for a six-wheeler, but nevertheless, he was also doing strong. Sometimes we discussed when you have strong drivers inside Formula One, then most likely you get also a Grand Prix inside your country. In the 70s, at that time, we had Ronnie Peterson and also Gunnar. Oh, I forgot the name. I will come back to this later. So we had two Swedish drivers, and due to this, also a Swedish Grand Prix. Unfortunately for Peterson, he only had to participate, but had to retire. So it wasn't that successful in his home races.
Yeah, and well, I mean, like we said before, this was a very experimental car, and it didn't do well in 1977. I think later on it had some successes, but yeah, there were multiple problems with it, and he had some fuel leaks in Canada and in Japan, right? And then we had this infamous episode when he actually collided with Gilles Villeneuve, right?
Yeah, and here because we have a double fatality, not of the drivers, but the accident killed a marshal and a photographer. As they were standing in an appropriate area, especially tragical for the marshal, because the photographer maybe triggered the problem, was standing in the forbidden zone. And if I remember it right, the marshal wanted to get this photographer out of this zone, and was trying to get him out of this dangerous place. He got killed himself too.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And he was trying to do the right thing, but was just in the right, in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, really, like you can say that the photographer was in the wrong place and shouldn't have been there, and the marshal was doing his job. But at the same time, I think this episode kind of marked the start of this problem. And then in 1978, we lost this fantastic driver, Ronnie Peterson. But I think that that episode really affected him as a person, as a driver.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, when you speak with people who had contact with him, many described him as not somebody who loved a lot. So the typical, I don't know if it's the typical Swedish cliche that people are less happy than, let's say, in Southern Europe. But it seems he was a very serious person, and I'm sure this affected him strongly.
Yeah. So I think this was a real sort of a real shock. I think we see this quite a lot in Formula One, that some people kind of break down right after these types of events, and others sort of we previously discussed, for example, Fangio, who had multiple episodes and continued, and Nina Farina, right? That's another one. So we just it is. I think when you are driving at such high speeds, you at one point become quite so you kind of ignore the risk that you are in a fast car. But episodes like that, they remind you that it is a dangerous sport, and anything can happen. And it's one thing when something happens to you, right? Like with Niki Lauda, for example. But it's quite different when you have driven and killed somebody. I mean, and that can affect you. And so, to my mind, well, Ronnie Peterson was affected by this episode, and it really showed in his future driving.
Yep.
Yeah, and again, he rejoined Lotus in 1978. And
Yes.
to be honest, I do think that, Lotus was a good team for him. He was very
Yeah.
successful in Lotus, and really, I think it was a very good dynamic between Ronnie Peterson and Colin Chapman. Like I said before, the safety of the car wasn't there for him. So that's why for him it was difficult, because he's like one of those methodical drivers, right? And it's difficult to drive in the car when you know it's not safe. However, I think like on a personal dynamic, it was a good combination with sort of Chapman's crazy ideas and Ronnie Peterson's sort of weighted approach to driving.
Yeah.
He, it was a very good start of the season, because he won the South African Grand Prix, right, with Lotus in 1978.
Yeah. So now we are in this, unfortunately, in his final year. So he was over the whole season until Italy. And this was maybe another of his part of his character. He seemed to be somebody who accepted being the number 2.
Very team player. He was a team player.
He was a very good team player. So he not only supported the number 1, he not only maybe supported the strategy to not overtake the number 1 driver, but he also not created an hostile atmosphere inside the team. So he was really a very good team player, which we saw in 1978, as sometimes he followed Andretti home very close. So we may speculate that there was a team strategy in place at Lotus at that part of the season, that Andretti was programmed as for winning the championship. Remember 1978, Lotus surprised everybody with the concept of the ground effect car. And due to this, the 2 Lotus was practically in a league of their own. So the question was only who could win the championship. And here Lotus decided that at some point that this should be Mario Andretti.
Yes, that's right. And he so this was again, like I said, a very good collaboration for him with Lotus, and definitely he was indeed able to take a second plays kind of secondary role in the team if necessary, but if necessary he could also lead that, as we saw before. So it was a very we can say very unusual character for Formula One driver, where most of them just want to get out there and win. He kind of understood that there is strategy and there is dynamics within the team.
Yes. And not to take anything away from Mario Andretti, and we also discussed this before, in the 1970s, the teams have been even the top teams have been much smaller than today. And we can assume that the number 2 driver not had the same materials as the number 1 driver. And this was not limited to Lotus, but I think it was related to all teams, including Ford. Maybe they could only deliver the update of the engine to one of the drivers. So also maybe the engine from Mario Andretti sometimes had a little bit more horsepower than the one from Ronnie Peterson. And so we have to consider also if we see the results in that season.
Yeah, that's right. Well, there was a lot of speculation about the team orders, but we do know that team orders exist.
Of course.
And the teams.
And it's understandable.
Well, the teams need to, if you are putting constructor championship as your priority, then obviously you need to make that happen, right? And yeah. Yeah, so again, he had very good prospects, right? And he even had a seat waiting for him at McLaren in 1979. Which
exactly, and here we see a little bit the speculations why Andretti was the number 1 driver and why Peterson the number 2, because Lotus perceived that Mario Andretti was better able to work together with the mechanics to give them the hints what is working, what not, and due to this, he was more. It was a better benefit for the development of the car, and this may have made him preferred by Colin Chapman to program him for the championship.
Yeah, we also had to mention that when the controversy surfaced with team orders, that Ronnie Peterson himself in multiple interviews, and you can see these interviews online,
Yes.
he denied any team orders. He just was saying that Andretti was faster. We don't know whether that was the case. I mean, obviously, there was a team. Definitely, we saw the team playing behavior here, but was it really on order? So there was some just understanding that it's better for the team, and he took those decisions. We don't actually know that.
Yes,
so.
And I'm not sure how was the regulations at that time in Formula One. Maybe team orders had been officially forbidden.
Well, I don't think that it was. I don't think there was a. Well, it's kind of a gray area, right? Which it kind of is still a little bit gray because it was not officially allowed, but not officially prohibited. In which case, you always assume that it's kind of not allowed if it's not officially allowed. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, it has always been one of those controversial topics because we all understand that there is a hierarchy within the teams. It exists because you don't want to have fierce competition on the circuit between, this is sort of the drawback of having 2 cars, right? If you have 2 fast cars, and you don't want the drivers to be competing against each other, and you just need to, as we saw, for example, with Red Bull, right? Where it can lead and all that. But definitely in terms of ethics, of course, you want the fastest guy to win, and this is a very sensitive topic. Yeah.
Exactly, and also, of course, difficult for yourself to accept that you're only the number 2, and there's maybe another reason why you not want to mention something like this in your interviews.
Well, I don't know about that because I think it depends on whether you want the team to succeed, right? Because ultimately, what you want is a seat next year, right? Yes. I think if you're doing that for a number of years and you're always number 2, that's probably not fair. But I guess if you are worried about, okay, let's get through the season, get the sponsorships for next year, so next year I get a chance to be the first, then it's, it's not really, it's not really that. It's not really kind of being second. It's all about the team, right?
Yeah. And it seems that Peterson would have had a seat in McLaren, and maybe there he would have been number 1.
Yeah, I think so. Well, likely anyway.
Likely, we never know. Because we have to speak about this fatal accident which happened in Monza.
Yeah, I just want to say before you continue about the incident, and we talk about, it's a very tragic event. Obviously, I just want to say for those of you who are watching us on YouTube or Spotify that the photo that you see actually was taken before that fatal race. So it's just before, literally like one of the last photos that we have of Ronnie Peterson.
Exactly, and why we may perceive it more tragic maybe as other accidents is because at the end all fatal accidents are tragical. And because here we had a big accident right at the start of the Italian Grand Prix, where had been various drivers being involved, including Vittorio Brambilla, who perceived to have the strongest impact. Hans-Joachim Stuck, Patrick Depailler, Didi Pironi, Derek Daly, and as many thought it had been triggered by Riccardo Patrese, but later the investigation concluded it was not Patrese's fault at all. I mean, quite famous the story that especially James Hunt, he perceived Patrese triggered this. He jumped out his car and tried to beat up Patrese for all of this.
Yeah, but I thought you were gonna say, Patrick, that so the tragedy of this specific case is that no one expected Ronnie Peterson to actually die as a result, because it didn't look like it was. If you watch the footage, it didn't actually look like the problem was serious. So yes, he was rushed to the hospital, but he looked visibly. It didn't look like it was. It's not like he died on the spot. And there were many hopes that he would be all right. There would be some rehabilitation period, but he would be all right. And unfortunately, that was not the case, which also sparkled a lot of speculation around the quality of care in Italy and all that, right? So there was this controversy around it.
Exactly. There was a controversy that the marshals had not been there on time. And if you see it on the video, it shows that it took quite a while. But nevertheless, there also has been some criticism that the doctors not understood really his accident and the treatment was not correct. Because nobody expected him to die. I read in one article, Mario Andretti said that he learned that he thought he would be okay just in the hospital, but then the next day on Sunday morning, he was driving and got a message, I think on the radio. So everybody was really surprised because nobody expected. It wasn't such a worse accident. So people have seen worse and everybody was worrying about Vittorio Brambilla, who seemed to have a much worse accident.
Worse state, yeah.
Right, and nobody thought that this could happen to Ronnie Peterson. So that seems, a lot of people claim that the doctors in the hospital not adequately
treated,
gave the treatment to him. I mean, we don't know because none of us...
I doubt that. I think it was just...
Right, none of us is a doctor, so I cannot, and honestly, I do not want to comment on such a speculation. Yeah,
and also, I just want to say that you probably heard some background noise, and that's kind of the third participant in our recordings very often. That's Patrick's dog, and we often have some contributions there. But kind of coming back to the tragic issue of Ronnie Peterson's death. Yeah, I mean, I seriously doubt that there was any problem. It's just that it's a perception, right? So if you can see visible injuries, it doesn't mean that internal injuries are less severe if you don't see them. And so in this case, it's just internal injuries turned out to be really severe. I'm sure that there was investigation in the hospital. We know there was a criminal investigation as a result of this case. But in fact, Ronnie Peterson passed away on the 11th of September from kidney failure as a result of this collision that he was in, and this was a big tragedy, not only for him, not only for his fans, but also for his family, as we will see shortly when we describe what happened afterwards, right? But I mean, I completely agree with you, Patrick, that blaming doctors, I'm sure they did everything they could. There was a I agree that there was a problem with marshals who could have acted quicker, and you can see that on the video, and you're thinking like, why are you not like doing anything? Like you just get there, right? So when you're watching the footage of it, but clearly this is something that so there, you know, the process could have been improved, but you know, once he got to a hospital, I'm sure that everything was done. That
yeah, I would think the same.
Yeah, and then the aftermath, right? So the aftermath was quite serious for many people. So the first thing is that we had the criminal investigation right after this this event.
Exactly, and we only had the investigation. We had also the prosecution at an Italian criminal court, where Riccardo Patrese and the race director Gianni Restilli have been both charged. Only later in '81 they have been cleared of all criminal charges.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it affected many people, and then, well, this is where it gets really tragic. Well, you know, Ronnie Peterson's wife never got over it, right? And she committed suicide in 1987, which, you know, if you think about it, well, almost a decade after, but considering the litigation, you know, in this case, and this really affected that family. We just, you know, want to stress that. Yeah.
Yes, and also the funeral itself. You see here the participant, Swedish driver Akis Strandberg, James Hunt, Jody Scheckter, John Watson, Emerson Fittipaldi, and Niki Lauda. So Niki Lauda was here, even if maybe they not have been friends, but at least they had a high level of respect. And
I don't think there was a conflict, right? Like I said before.
Exactly.
And here's the guy that you forgot the name of. I think Ganna Nilsson, right?
I not forgot it. I not forgot it. I just wanted to mention it separately because Gunnar Wilson was also in Formula One, not in '78 anymore. He stopped after 1977, not because he had an accident, not because he didn't found a seat. In fact, he had a seat for '78, but had to decline it because he got diagnosed with cancer. And at his funeral, he was already very marked from his cancer treatment. So you see him bald, very white. So you see a man where you perceive he only has cancer, very affected, and you think this guy only has some few days more. And in fact, he wanted to be there to show a last sign of respect to his friend Ronnie Peterson, and shortly after the funeral, he also died to cancer.
Yeah. I didn't mean that you forgot to mention Gunnar here, but before, like earlier in this episode, you were talking about Gunnar, but you forgot the last.
Sorry, you're right. Yes.
Yeah, the last name. So I just want to say that was Ganna Nilsson. Yeah. Yeah. So obviously, again, we do apologize if you know you. That we had to mention the suicide, but it happened. So also the couple had a daughter, Nina. Well, I don't actually know what happened to Nina. I know that she's called Nina Kennedy now.
She's still alive, and we will mention her in some minutes.
Yeah. So I know that her name is now Nina Kennedy, but that's pretty much all I know. All I know about her. She's okay. She's okay. Yeah. So at least nothing happened with Ronnie Peterson's daughter, but yeah, his wife definitely, you know, it really affected her. And there was a long litigation process, and there was a long, you know, investigation and everything. And you know, it was very difficult for her to take this all in, and she unfortunately committed suicide in 1987.
Yeah, but Well, to come back more to the positive side, here we repeat the technology. So a little bit where he was active, starting at March, the first 3 years, then 4 years in Lotus, short intermezzo at Tyrrell at a six-wheeler before he come back to Lotus for the 1978 season. So this is all the cars which he drove as part of his career inside Formula One.
Yeah, and if you look at the last season, it was very successful year for him. And he was, again, very successful driver in Formula One, very underappreciated because of his early death, unfortunately. And again, we have this very iconic Lotus car on the screen if you're watching us on YouTube or Spotify. Definitely a lot of people remember, well, I personally remember this design of Lotus car, gold and black and gold, and I do remember Ronnie Peterson in it, and that's definitely one of the memories, and one of the, like, when someone says Formula One, the first association is Lotus. And,
right.
And well, one of the first associations is Lotus and Ronnie Peterson. I know for many people it's Ferrari, and they're probably the favorite driver in Ferrari. But for me, it's like one of the first associations really for Lotus and the drivers that driven Lotus cars, and definitely Ronnie Peterson is one of them.
Right, and if you have very good eyes, you can see in the background also the Tyrrell six-wheeler.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, now let's let Ronnie Peterson speak, and we analyze his quotes. As always, we will read it to you too, because not all of you can see us, or maybe you see us on your smartphone and it may be a little bit too small. First, Mario Andretti. It was so unfair to have a tragedy connected with probably what should have been the happiest day of my career. I couldn't celebrate, but also I knew that trophy would be with me forever, and I knew also that Ronnie would have been happy for me. And this underlines that Ronnie Peterson really was always a good team player. He had a very good relation with Andretti, and again, even if he had a big talent, he not became frustrated, or at least he didn't let this show to the other team members, which is a very unique character, I think.
That's right. So the second quote that we have is also from his Lotus team, which is from Colin Chapman, who was the team principal. And, he definitely acknowledged Ronnie Peterson's talent. And he said, Ronnie drives absolutely flat out all the time. If he's off the place, then it might be the car, not him. Right. Yeah. And we know that it was the car, in fact, most of the time. And we know that Ronnie Peterson drove in the old car and won 3 races. And so, this was definitely the case. But there was a good, like I said before, there was a very good dynamic between him and Colin Chapman. And I think, to be honest, Colin Chapman, well, we know that he had several favorite drivers that drove for him, but Ronnie Peterson is definitely one of them.
Right. Next quote, I have 2 remedies for the joints and the skids, the steering wheel and the accelerator pedal. So he had a very spectacular racing style. That's why he not only was appreciated by the fans, but also by later generations of Formula One drivers. And when we are speaking about his legacy, we will mention that too.
Yeah, and I just want to say that this is like I said before, he was like this very traditional, methodical driver, and this was, and this was why there was this well, not tension, but it was just different style from Niki Lauda, who was all about data. But this guy says, I have steering wheel and accelerator pedal. Okay, so these are quite traditional tools, right? I just use them. That's what he says. I just practice, and use them. And that's why I'm able to get through these turns and skids. Yeah,
that's right. To keep my equilibrium, I need to go fast. I always need to push the car to the limit. If I slow down just a little, I start making some mistakes. So I'm under better circumstances when I push hard.
Yeah, and again, this is just method, right? So method and experience strategy. And well, the quote from Gilles Villeneuve: "People want drivers who come off the turn brushing the way Ronnie Peterson did." So, and this is again the appreciation of the method, how you do this.
I mean, no surprise that Gilles Villeneuve was saying this. I mean, he had a very similar style disregarding.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So it's all about hard work and training, right? So more traditional, and again, quite different from, for example, Niki Lauda, who was about let's take all the data, calculate the probability of the risk, and then make a strategy. So here it was just a very traditional sports attitude. So it's just practice and experience.
And being a racer, always trying to drive at the limit, in opposite to Niki Lauda, who maybe just in some races drove 90% because it was enough to achieve results with driving 90%. But somebody as Peterson or Gilles Villeneuve, they always drove 100%, which has been very spectacular to see. Even maybe just driving 90% would have been better in some of the situations. As mentioned, also let's have a view on the legacy. And here we finally mention Ronnie's daughter, Nina, who was named after Nina Rindt, Jochen Rindt's wife.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, tragically, the careers of Ronnie Peterson and Jochen Rindt reminds me a little bit. So Nina is now called Kennedy. Honestly, I don't know how she's related or if she is related to the famous Kennedy clan or if it's some different Kennedy. And again, a little bit tragic, this whole story about the Ronnie Peterson Museum, because it was opened in October
28.
Already
2008, yeah. It was opened in 2008 and closed.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Because it was opened in May 28, but already the next year, October 29, it has to be closed to unsecure government founding. And I mean, a little bit earlier, I already priced the Swedish government society system. But here, honestly, I don't understand why the government could not secure the founding for his museum. I mean, it wasn't such a big national museum. So I don't understand why this wasn't possible by the Swedish government to achieve.
Yeah, I did find the footage on YouTube for this museum. It's not very high quality footage, but you do if you just Google the Ronnie Peterson Museum on YouTube, you will find a very short footage, and it didn't look like a big museum. It was pretty much just one room, I think.
I think I saw the same video. That's why I mentioned I don't know why it was possible. We're not speaking about a big museum, but a rather small one, which is also very interesting to see. I only can compare it because I had the opportunity to see the Gilles Villeneuve Museum, who also is pretty much a quite small one. But great to visit anyway, because sometimes the people who organize these small museums, they are really there with all their heart. So it's a big recommendation also to check out these smaller museums.
Yeah, I think it has to do with the fact that, like I said, he's very underappreciated driver, and probably many people in 2008 already forgot who he was, sadly. Because it's it's a long time between 1978 and 2008, but nevertheless, I think these cars could have become, well, I'm sure they have become an exposition in they are included in exposition in other museums, motor museums and racing museums, where there is more appreciation of Ronnie Peterson as a Formula One driver.
That's right. Speaking a little bit about popular culture, if you have the opportunity, there's one movie. It's called Superswede. It's Superswede, including, of course, Ronnie Peterson. I think it was also produced by his daughter, or at least supported. It's available on YouTube, but but you have to pay for it. So it's legally on YouTube, if I'm correct, as the last time I've checked it. But you have to pay some dollars to see it.
Yeah, it is. Also, it is definitely available, so you can find find it. Of course, as usual, we do encourage you to watch copyrighted material and support. In order to make independent films like that, you do need support. So definitely, these few dollars are worth it. And remember that you are supporting independent filmmaking by doing that.
Right. And also, as mentioned earlier, he was inspiration for other drivers, for especially Michele Alboreto, who had his blue and yellow helm design made in honor to Ronnie Peterson, his idol, and other Swedish driver, Marcus Ericsson. He used his helm design for celebrating the 40th anniversary of Peterson's first win at the 2014 Monaco Grand Prix, where Ericsson participated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's all for today.
Yeah, brilliant. So this was an episode about Ronnie Peterson, again, one of the most successul and again underappreciated drivers in Formula One. Like we said before, he had a very methodical style, all about training and practice, but at the same time, he took a lot of risk. If you think about it, he drove the six-wheeler. It's a very risky thing to do, and he drove for Lotus, which was one of the least safe teams in the history of Formula One. But he took those risks, and unfortunately, we lost him in 1978. But nevertheless, he will remain. I guess for at least for Swedish people, one of the most famous drivers there. But I also wish that more people were remembering him across the globe. So, and if you haven't heard about Ronnie Peterson before, so please do check out books and materials that you can find online, and the film that we mentioned, the Superswede film. Definitely worth watching. And like I said before, there are many interviews with Ronnie Peterson that you should check out.
Yeah.
And again, as usual, just to remind you that we are present on YouTube and Spotify in video form and on many different platforms as podcast. And thank you again for listening to us and watching the video. And please leave your comments, and we'll be glad to see you again.
Thanks. See you, and until the next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.